Every moment you argue with reality, you position the experience life presents you as an enemy, and therefore, your inner frequency moves away from a flow that would liberate you and becomes trapped in a narrow observer loop. What you resist grows because the quantum field perceives your emotional signatures as data and amplifies whichever frequency you're sending the most energy to, that vibration that passes through you. This shouldn't be like this. Sends the universe the command, reproduce this experience, and you unknowingly continue to experience different versions of the same scene. While it may seem like a minor detail, the energy of resistance keeps you on the same track like a time tunnel. Therefore, the cycle you experience is not a coincidence, but a recurring resonance at your conscious level. The human mind's greatest delusion is believing it can change things in external reality by using force. However, the quantum field interprets the energy of coercion as a locking signal, tightening the timeline. As a result, the more you struggle, the more you bump into the walls of the same experience. Sometimes, this impact becomes so invisible that you believe the source of your problems lies outside. Yet, the outside world is merely a delayed reflection of your internal adjustments. Resistance is much more than saying, "I don't want this reality." It's actually saying, "I'm focusing on this reality." And whatever you focus on grows. This is how the universe works. What you feed its frequency grows, and what you withdraw fades. If some of the cycles you're experiencing today seem to have followed you for years, it's because you've unconsciously invested emotional energy in them repeatedly. The most ironic thing is this: the more you resent a situation, the more you keep it alive. A person, a problem, a resentment, or a disappointment, they all feed on your emotional field and continue to live. Therefore, resistance itself, like an invisible chain, connects you to your own reality. Struggling with something doesn't eliminate it from your life. It simply gives it a more pronounced presence. This is precisely the power of what we call quantum acceptance. Acceptance isn't surrender. It's ceasing to fight what exists and reclaiming your own energy. Resistance is energy leaking outward. Acceptance is energy flowing back inward. When this flow back begins, the quantum field rereads your frequency, and the timeline begins to relax. This relaxed timeline allows new possibilities to quietly approach because there's no longer a constantly compressing loop. Everything centered on resistance acts like a mental magnet, drawing you back to the same experiences, but the power of this magnet weakens the moment you stop arguing. For reality to shift, your mind must first stop fighting, because the quantum shift occurs not in the noisy moments of change, but in the moments of expanding inner silence. When you stop resisting, you realize that life flows with you, not against you. This realization isn't acceptance. It's the invisible signature of trusting in the guidance of your higher self. When something inside you says, "Maybe there's something I need to learn here," reality instantly loses its rigidity, because you're no longer fighting it. And the moment you let go of that fight, a new door of possibility, one that has remained closed for years, quietly opens. If these words feel familiar to you right now, and a small stirring arises within, it's not just a coincidence. It means the energy of this passage is perfectly aligned with you. If you feel internally ready to let go of your fight with reality, write, "I stop fighting my reality," in the comments. Because the vibration of intention is stronger than the words themselves, and writing this sentence is the true first step toward dissolving resistance. This step represents the threshold, where a quantum shift begins, a silent yet powerful threshold. The quantum field's most powerful command is silence, for it represents that deep point where the observer withdraws and allows energy to flow naturally. Most people's minds believe they can solve problems by talking, thinking, and analyzing. However, this effort creates an invisible field of resistance, which prevents the system from reorganizing itself. The louder the observer, the more blurred reality becomes. Because the universe reads your emotional tone as an instruction and reproduces that instruction over and over again, constantly observing a situation, criticizing it, fighting against it, saying, "It shouldn't be like this," triggers the observer effect of quantum mechanics. The weight of the observer weighs down on the system, and the system becomes fixed in its dependence on the observer. This is why some things in your life seem unchanging for years, because you constantly observe them and feed them the same meanings. Yet, silence is the dissolution of the observer effect. Silence is the simplest, clearest way for consciousness to tell the universe, I don't want you to repeat this cycle anymore. It's as if you suddenly entered a noisy room and stopped talking. At that moment, the entire energy of the environment changes. Silence is an active force, not a passive void. It contains thousands of subordinate commands. Not surrender, but alignment. Not renunciation, but recalibration. Where the mind speaks, energy compresses. Where the mind silences, energy expands. Therefore, when inner silence occurs, the quantum field perceives a void. And this void is interpreted as a new possibility. The void is the universe's favorite setting because it can place a new reality there at will. Your silence is like an invitation to the universe. Now you can try another possibility. And while this may seem like no action from the outside, it represents the greatest leap in consciousness. The silence of the observer is also the neutralization of emotional resonance. When the negative energy you've invested in a situation dissolves, the system no longer has to generate it for you. It's like the surface of a foggy lake suddenly calming. The clearer the water, the clearer the sky reflects. When the surface of the mind calms, your higher self becomes more powerfully visible, because silence opens a secret channel. Intuition. Intuition sees paths that logic cannot. When you force a situation, the voice of intuition goes unheard. But when you become silent, intuition begins to flow through you like the subtle frequency that fills the entire universe. In the quantum realm, everything operates through frequency signatures, and silence is the 0 point of frequency, the birthplace of a new timeline. The moment you enter this 0 point, the universe no longer maintains its old records for you. At that moment, you have broken free from old cycles and stepped into the magnetic field of a new possibility. That is why most major transformations begin not in a moment of action, but in a moment of acceptance and stillness. That gentle calm that settles within is a loud command to the universe. I am ready. And the universe never ignores this command. The silence of the observer also alters the flow of time. Rapid thoughts accelerate time. Intense emotions compress it. But silence expands time. In this expanding time, awareness increases. And as awareness increases, what seems like coincidence begins to take on meaning. Invisible connections begin to emerge between events. Patterns you haven't understood for years suddenly dissolve. Because when your mind is silent, reality reveals itself to you. Silence is the universe's teacher. Sometimes, by saying nothing, it reveals everything. And if this whispers something to you, it's because you're ready to step back as the observer and recenter yourself in your own energy. The profoundest power of silence is the state of contactless contact it establishes with the invisible field that shapes reality. For when you stop speaking, the universe begins to speak. From the outside, it may seem as if nothing is happening, but a massive shift occurs at the level of consciousness. The vibrations of the old timeline dissolve, and the new timeline begins to resonate with you. After a while, the coincidences you couldn't make sense of, the people you encounter, the small signs you encounter become the fruits of your silence. None of these are coincidences. They are all the first echoes of new possibilities that filter through the door opened by the observer's withdrawal. And that's precisely why, sometimes, doing nothing is the most powerful act of all. For silence is that sacred threshold where you allow the universe to act on your behalf. What we call a quantum shift isn't simply a dramatic rupture in life's external circumstances, as many people believe. Rather, it's an invisible yet extremely powerful frequency shift that begins with the gradual dissolution of internal resistance. The moment you release the resistance, the universe stops fighting you. It was never fighting you. It was simply reflecting back the meaning you ascribe to it. The more you push, the more stuck you become. Because pushing feeds the energy of the old timeline and keeps you in the same experience. That's why some issues seem to remain unmoved for years. You've been sending them energy without even realizing it. The quantum shift begins at the point where this energy recedes. A door opens, but not in the external world, but within your conscious level. This door is a passage that allows the possibilities of another version of your life to enter your field, as if a breath of fresh air were entering for the first time through a window that had been closed for a long time. The dissolution of resistance is equivalent to the dissolution of mental tension. A tense mind sees everything as a threat, interprets potential as a risk, and thus prevents new possibilities from approaching it. But when the mind softens, a larger space opens within its own energy. This vast space is called the intuitive space. The intuitive space is known as the place where the quantum shift begins, because it indicates that old cycles no longer bind you and that a new path is approaching. As long as the mind speaks, nothing changes. But when the mind is silent, reality begins to flow. This flow is the true manifestation of the quantum shift. A shift isn't something suddenly changing. It changes because you stop seeing it the same way. When you look at a situation with a different consciousness, the energy of that situation changes. You can't forcefully shape external reality, but when you change the consciousness that looks at it, external reality is forced to follow suit. One of the fundamental laws of the quantum field is precisely this. If the observer changes, what is observed also changes. In other words, whatever your energy signature is carried by the external world, it brings it back to you. At the moment of the shift, this signature changes because you no longer carry the old baggage. This realization usually comes in a very quiet moment. The moment you're not doing anything, just getting tired and surrendering. The moment you stop trying. Right there, the door opens. Sometimes it's opened with a whisper of intuition, sometimes with a strange peace rising from within, sometimes with the realization that what's been bothering you for years is no longer bothering you. This realization seems tiny, but it's a giant crack in your energy level. And the crack is subtle from the outside, but it's massive within. The shift is the realignment of multiple timelines to your frequency. As your highest line approaches you, your lower frequency versions begin to fall behind. This appears as something coincidentally starting to work in your life. There's no coincidence. There's only alignment. The universe begins to respond to your new signature. So, when you stop trying to force something, it resolves itself, as is often the case. What actually happens isn't a resolution, but a shift. You've moved to a higher possibility. There's no problem with that possibility. The problem existed only in the old frequency. One of the most interesting aspects of the quantum shift is this. You usually don't notice it while you're experiencing it, because the shift occurs into the present. The transition from the old reality to the new reality is so smooth that you only notice the transformation later, in retrospect. And often, you'll say something like, "When did everything become like this?" This is a sign of a quantum shift. The door opened by dissolving resistance has already transported you to the reality you were meant to be. You simply agreed to synchronize with it, that's all. If a wave of relief rises within you right now, it means you're very close to the energy shift point, because the most significant sign experienced before the shift is a causeless inner peace. This peace is the moment the new timeline beckons you. When your frequency signature changes, even time begins to shape itself according to you. This is a natural consequence of one of the most surprising yet simple laws of quantum reality. Time, while appearing like a fixed line from the outside, is a fluid field that stretches and contracts according to the vibrational rate of your consciousness. When a person's frequency drops, time becomes slower. Everything seems more difficult, slower, and more tedious. And events feel as if they're stuck together and not moving forward. This isn't due to external circumstances. When consciousness operates at a lower vibration, the time field compresses and the flow of events becomes more rigid. However, when your frequency rises, that is, when your energy signature becomes lighter, time suddenly speeds up, the flow becomes easier, and events begin to unravel in a chain reaction. This unraveling isn't chance. It's the expansion of the structure of time by a higher frequency. All processes in the universe follow the rhythm of your energy field. Therefore, when your inner vibration softens, it's not surprising. It's inevitable that life softens along with you. When the mind is tense, time is tense. When the mind is relaxed, time stretches. That's why, while some days it feels like the hours aren't moving, other days you realize everything has unraveled in seconds. You call it a coincidence, but it's actually a momentary change in your frequency signature. Quantum experts call this consciousness-based time stretching. We experience this in our daily lives as small coincidences and synchronizations. When your frequency signature changes, paths that haven't been open for years open up. Opportunities that haven't been there for years become visible. Energies that have been holding you back for a long time dissolve. You might suddenly meet the right person, hear the right idea, arrive at the threshold of the right door. None of this is manipulated from the outside. It's all a result of the realignment of your timeline. Just like an orchestra conductor, your conscious frequency determines the rhythm of all events in the universe. Low frequency is like a sorrowful melody, heavy, repetitive, and limiting. High frequency, on the other hand, is a powerful harmony in which every instrument is synchronized. Therefore, when your frequency changes, not only your emotional world changes, but also your experience of time. In the quantum realm, time submits to the energy of the observer. A higher vibration consciousness operates on a much broader timescale than a lower vibration one. This expanding timescale creates awareness. As awareness increases, you begin to see the connections between events. These connections guide you to your new timeline. Many people remember a time in their lives when they said, "Everything happened simultaneously." In fact, not everything happened simultaneously. Its frequency suddenly shifted, and time was bent in its favor. This bending may seem miraculous from the outside, but it is actually the most natural consequence of the science of consciousness. When your frequency signature changes, even the meanings you ascribe to your past dissolve. The memories that once weighed you down no longer hold your energy because they no longer belong to that old version of time. When you lose resonance with them, even the past lets go. And this moment is the clearest manifestation of a quantum shift. If your past no longer calls to you, your future begins to call. Time stretches toward you, drawing you into a wider field of awareness, a profound inner peace, a slight sense of happiness that comes for no apparent reason, or an inexplicable sense of confidence rising from within. All of these are signs that time is bending toward you, because the consciousness whose frequency has risen has now connected with its highest future possibility. And this connection is like an invisible bridge across time, gently but surely carrying you to your new reality. Even if you don't realize it, the universe carries you. That's why, when your frequency rises, the rhythm of events changes. Some things dissolve quickly, some things quietly disappear from your life, and some things fall into place effortlessly. The universe follows your energy, rearranging the timeline. And perhaps that's why these words resonate with you right now. Your frequency signature has already begun to shift, and time is now preparing to flow on your side. Feeling this readiness is the strongest evidence that your new reality is approaching. What we call acceptance isn't passive submission, as many people believe, accepting the conditions imposed by life, or withdrawing with the "there's nothing we can do" attitude. On the contrary, acceptance is the most subtle frequency adjustment of consciousness and the most profound transformational move that takes place within the quantum field. The reason everything you resist comes back to you even more forcefully is because the energy of resistance stabilizes reality. The quantum field interprets your emotional tension as a command and activates the message, "Keep generating this experience." However, acceptance means canceling that command. When you accept, you're actually returning not to the outside world, but to your own internal frequency. At that point, when your mind is exhausted, your emotions are constricted, and events are circling the same cycle over and over again, acceptance is a coded signal that recalibrates the inner gates of consciousness. When you accept a situation, you stop vibrating at the same frequency and thereby release the resonance that keeps it holding you. People often say, "I don't want to accept because I don't want to surrender." But what they don't know is that acceptance is a creative force that works in the exact opposite direction of surrender. Surrender is the collapse of energy. Acceptance is the return of energy to its center. When you accept, Instead of viewing your experience as a struggle the universe has orchestrated to defeat you, you begin to see it as a reflection brought before your own consciousness. This shift in perspective causes an instantaneous transformation of your frequency signature. Acceptance isn't about relinquishing control. It's about realizing that you never actually had control. When the mind clings to the illusion of control, chaos increases because the desire for control feeds on the lower frequency of fear. Acceptance, however, is the energy of saying, "I'm not fighting what's happening right now." And this energy triggers the fastest alignment in the quantum field. At the point where resistance ceases, time expands, and intuition rises in this expanding time. And when intuition rises, the order behind the apparent chaos is revealed. That feeling of lightness you experience at the moment of acceptance is actually reality saying, you can now shift to a new path. And this path often extends to a possibility far beyond the reality you're trying to control. The mind mistakes acceptance for weakness, but conscious acceptance is a display of strength. Because the mind deals with the literal logic of events, while consciousness reads the energy behind them. Accepting a situation isn't surrendering to it, it's reading its energy and choosing to no longer resonate with it. This choice is the most critical step in the quantum shift. Acceptance withdraws energy from past cycles and brings you into the present. The present is the only point where reality is created. People experience the same problem for years because, while struggling with that problem, they continually give it energy. Everything you give energy to lives on. When you accept, you withdraw energy, and the problem appears to be resolved. However, what happens isn't resolution. It's that the problem no longer calls to you because your resonance has changed. Acceptance is the gateway to emotional neutralization. The moment you neutralize, old cycles cease to recognize you. A problem you experienced with a person, a fear, a regret, a loss, all of them leave you the moment you release your energy. Acceptance is the awareness of, okay, this is what happened. So what should I learn now? When this awareness comes into play, the quantum field senses that you're ready and opens the door to new possibilities. Interestingly, the moment of acceptance often comes during life's most challenging moments, because the mind is so exhausted that the true voice of consciousness is heard for the first time. Many people mistake this voice for inner peace. But in reality, it's your highest future possibility calling out to you. Acceptance is the condition for hearing this voice. When the mind quiets, the frequency of consciousness rises. When frequency rises, time stretches toward you. When time stretches, reality rearranges. Acceptance is the first link in this chain, and perhaps right now, as you read this chapter, you unknowingly exhaled a small breath, felt something lighten within you, or said, "Yes, I think I don't want to fight anymore." Even the energy of that sentence is the beginning of acceptance, because acceptance isn't a verbal decision, it's an energetic shift. This moment of transition is the moment you step into your new timeline. That subtle, almost imperceptible moment, when you stop arguing with reality, is actually the first spark of your new reality, because arguing generates resistance, and resistance acts like an invisible chain that ties you to your current timeline. You might be arguing with a situation, a person, an event, or even your own past. Every argument's energy sends a command to the quantum field: keep this experience active for me. That's why some cycles don't change, some problems don't resolve, and some people's behavior continues to wound you in the same way. Because arguing perpetuates the energy you've invested in that situation. The moment you stop arguing, a vast silence forms in the system. This silence creates a void, and the void is the birthplace of a new possibility in the quantum field. This birth moment is imperceptible from the outside, but within, an energetic shift occurs so powerfully that reality is forced to reorganize itself. Stopping arguing isn't passivity. On the contrary, it's consciousness reclaiming its own authority. The statement, "I'm not going to fight this anymore," seems gentle, but energetically, it's the closing of one door and the opening of another. A closed door is a cycle that keeps you on the same frequency for years. An open door represents a new possibility that will transport you to a higher timeline. This is precisely where the observer effect, mentioned by quantum physicists, comes into play. When the observer stops struggling with a phenomenon and moves into a neutral field of observation, the phenomenon can no longer retain its old energy, because what sustained it was your emotional charge, your argument. Where the argument ceases, a field of existence collapses. The silence that follows this collapse signifies a rewritable reality for the universe. The reason the door to the new reality opens so smoothly is because your energy no longer feeds the old frequency. After a while, strange harmonies begin to emerge in your life. What was once a knot unravels. The feeling you felt in the wrong place disappears. The same sentence no longer triggers you. These are not changes. They are the first signs of your new reality, because the consciousness that has abandoned the argument begins to synchronize with your higher self. As long as you argue, you're at a low frequency. Why did this happen? I didn't deserve this. I wish it hadn't happened. Each of these phrases is an expression of clinging to the old timeline. Yet, the moment you stop arguing, it's not the slight feeling of let go, but a feeling of release. Release isn't the independence of the low frequency, it's the higher frequency pulling you up. That's why the most significant symptom you experience after stopping arguing is peace. Because peace is the energetic equivalent of aligning with the new timeline. As resistance dissolves, certain areas of your life gain momentum. Encounters you thought were coincidental increase. Signals of synchronization become visible. And a feeling of something's getting better rises within you. These aren't illusions. The moment you stop arguing, the universe begins to offer you a new rhythm. This rhythm is felt first in small steps, then transforms into a larger flow. Suddenly, you realize that an issue that's been bothering you for years no longer bothers you. This isn't a resolution, but a shift. The reason for this is that the old timeline can no longer hold you, and your new reality accepts your frequency. What's most surprising is that this transition goes unnoticed, because the quantum shift occurs not with an explosion, but with silence. That graceful expansion within the silence is a sign that your consciousness has shifted to a new version. You feel time bending towards you. The rhythm of events softens, life flows more smoothly, and you experience a deeper sense of trust. This trust comes not from controlling your future, but from your future calling you from the right place. Because the new reality begins to breathe with you the moment you stop fighting it. Perhaps a small sigh of relief rose within you, or perhaps the phrase, "Yes, there's nothing to fight," spontaneously crossed your mind. The frequency of that sentence is the key that unlocks the doors to your new reality. Because the place where you stop arguing isn't just where the old reality ends. It's where you step onto the invisible threshold of the new reality. If you'd like to continue this journey together, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to keep our frequency aligned. Also, write, "I am open to my new reality," in the comment to activate the energy of this video so your intention leaves a signature in the quantum field.